for this very special celebration. Um, President Mullen is all over campus because it's True Blue Weekend, and he will be joining us in a little while. So I do want you to know that he will be here too. I have a few formal remarks that I want to make, and then we'll have some friends and family speak. So welcome, and thank you for being here on this special occasion. Today we dedicate this building to Professor Sandy Huntington, and of course celebrate his legacy. Professor Huntington, or as everyone called him, Sandy, taught a course called Architecture of the Sacred, part of which involved Hartwick students, some of you, designing and building this Strawbale house. Many of you are here today. This is Hartwick College at its finest, where creative and dedicated faculty, students, and friends accomplish great things. The college had a vision about what could become of this beautiful site, which it purchased in 1971 from the Nunsing family, still neighbors. Since then, Pine Lake has flourished and inspired generations of students to think and live with passion and purpose. Hartwick is the kind of college that makes possible something as powerful and lasting as building a sacred space. It is so gratifying to see many of the builders of the house here today as we celebrate the lasting impact of Sandy's teaching and preserve his memory for generations of students to come. Again, thank you for being here.
Can you join me down here? Sure.
I don't know that Liz needs an introduction, but here we go, Liz Huntington, everyone.
Bill said, do you want to say a little bit? And I said, sure. It is a strange and wonderful gathering. I've seen so many old friends and new people, and Sandy would have loved this. He loved Hartwick. When we first came here, there was no idea that we would spend our lives here, that we would raise our children in Oneonta, that he would find a home in academics here. But he did. He was a small bag, long journey monk and a householder teacher, and he fell into a role he never anticipated because he loved the world, I think, and he wanted to share the ideas that mattered to him with students and with other people. And he was a natural teacher, but he fought it at first. But here he found a place to research and write and build and dream and give back what he really cared about and to teach. I think for him, Hartwick was the heart of it was Pine Lake. Experiential learning was what he cared about most. And this place and this college allowed him to do that in many of his classes, but especially this one where hands and hearts were put together to mean something. And this would mean so much to him because it's recognizing that that kind of thing is invaluable because the experiences are the things we take with us. So I'm glad to see this happening, and I miss him a great deal, but it's nice to know that his words and all these people are people he touched, and that I hope Pine Lake is always here because it's a resource not all colleges have, and it's something unique to this place, and it gives an opportunity for a different kind of engagement than I think students can get in other places and that we really need right now.
So I'm Joe Ficano, by the way. I go back with Sandy to when we moved to Oneonta in the late 90s, and our kids brought us together. Sam and Ryan were in preschool together. And so we met from the time. In any case, I'm going to introduce a few students, and it's been a joy, let me just say, working with Justin Dimmel primarily, but all of you, so many of you who are here from the late 90s to the early aughts, who took the course that Justin will tell you about, and it's been a lot of fun organizing. So thank you, Justin Dimmel, class of 02.
Thank you, Joe. Okay, so everyone's comfortable. You're relax. It's going to be a couple of minutes. I'm going to get through this as expeditiously as possible. But I think, given that we're all gathered here to honor Sandy, I'm also going to take my time because there's some important things I want to say. I loved Sandy. I can say without exaggeration that meeting Sandy changed my life. When I found myself in Religions of the Far East in the fall of 1998, I knew immediately that Professor Huntington was the real deal. Here was a world-renowned, honest-to-goodness scholar, someone who had trained in philology, a word I thought was made up when I first encountered it. He read ancient languages. He was active in scholarly debates that involved words like soteriological and hermeneutics. He translated Buddhist literature and had lived for years in India. As his students, we caught little glimpses into his life and past lives as motorcycle enthusiast, fine woodworker, limo driver, piano player, writer, his cool wife and adorable kids. He may as well have been Indiana Jones. In his seminars, Sandy invited us to grapple with eclectic, unusual texts, from ancient Chinese poetry to the musings of an obscure British mystic. We examined life, meaning, ego, death, love, consciousness, free will, God, all of it, all the stuff, the big, important stuff of reality and illusion, darkness and light, suffering and nirvana. On one unforgettable occasion, he sang, "Let It Be." Whatever he did with profound respect for and in consideration of how we could be challenged, spiritually, intellectually, creatively. To be his student was, in a word, awesome. His teaching was simple and powerful. We read books, wrote essays, and had discussions. What was key and why he was so beloved by his students is that in all he did, he acted as if we were his academic equals, and that our ideas were worthy of his scholarly attention. That belief in us, that we were up to the task of contemplating the wonder and mystery of being, that faith, that hopefulness, is what made it possible for Sandy to create a course where a crew of untrained, unskilled 20-somethings could design and build 2 entire houses. Beautiful, magical, wabi-sabi houses. One-of-a-kind works of art that were sculpted by communities of students, faculty, staff, and neighbors. All of us, fellow workers, who through this experience became lifelong friends. The Strawbale and Cop houses endure as a testament to Sandy's vision for what liberal arts education could be, and more so, what it should be. In the recruitment flyer for Architecture the Sacred, Sandy asked, "Ever wished you could get college credit for doing something really practical?" It was not false advertising. On the books, Architecture of the Sacred was a 2-credit religious studies course. 1 credit was a recognizably academic, if slightly unusual, seminar. We did some readings, we toured enchanting spiritual dwellings, and we contemplated what it meant for a space to be sacred. We met in the lakeside classroom right here at Pine Lake, and at the beginning of each meeting, Sandy guided us in meditation. Sitting together may sound like a strange use of class time, but from Sandy's view, those 20 minutes of shared silence brought us together as a community and prepared us for the challenge ahead. I think back to that first January of this revolutionary experiment. We huddled around a campfire right here and took the first steps toward realizing an idea of community-centered design. When I look back on it now, I wonder, how in the world did we think that would work? Take a moment and look at the Strawbale house. Its bulging walls and south-facing windows, its L-shaped stone patio, cascading roofs and exposed wooden beams, how it sits just so right here, as if it were meant to be built here all along. I think about the kind of person who could imagine something like that, who believed that students were capable of the sustained cooperative work that was required to design a house by group discussion. Think of some of the group discussions you've had in your life. Now imagine doing that twice. And as fantastical as that sounds, remember, the design work was the more traditionally academic component of the course. That was the easy part. The other part of the course was more radical. For 1 month, one beautiful, exhausting, intensive June, we worked. We built what we designed. Some days you might find yourself heaving bales of straw or cutting wire lath. Other days it was digging post holes or hauling barrels of mortar. We did what we were asked, deepening the ties that bound us together as a community through shared physical exertion. And for this, the crucial component, Sandy brought in reinforcements. Professors Clark and Chow-Ling, master builders whose job it was to focus our enthusiasm into real productive work. Clark and Chow-Ling were pros, yet following Sandy's example, they could draw from seemingly unlimited reserves of grace and patience, which they used to teach us whatever we were willing to learn about the practice of building. They worked alongside us, organized us, supervised us, showed us what to do, and then held their tongues as we bungled it up or abused their tools. And most importantly, they gave us the space to fail and figure things out on our own. It was incredible to have them on site each day, setting a standard for competent, skilled craftsmanship to which we all inspired. And then meanwhile, it fell to Sandy to tie all the threads together. He somehow arranged it so that the academic credit for June was part of our regular tuition, and our housing at Pine Lake was free. This meant that the course was available to students who wouldn't have had the means to participate otherwise. Students like me. He even secured a boarding allowance for us. It wasn't a lot, but it was enough that the group of us, by pooling our allowance, could buy groceries collectively and cook communal meals. That wasn't a requirement, but that was one of Sandy's famous suggestions. He was like, what you guys could do. And we're like, yeah, we could do that. And it was great. Kitchen crew became its own ritual, where the chefs for the day would head to the lodge in the late morning, and an enormous, hearty vegetarian meal would appear several hours later. For some of us, it was the only cooking we did in college, and those midday feasts were glorious. It's hard to imagine all he did, looking back on it now. Myself, an academic with years of firsthand experience of how daunting it can be to do bold things in bureaucracies. No disrespect to Hartwick College. This is just general academic stuff. Where did the permits and permissions come from? What was my mom told? What about health insurance, workers' comp, all the things? The gumption busters that stall ideas before they get to the stage where a foundation is poured. Of course, Sandy had help and support and worked with the leadership at Hartwick and Pine Lake, but even still, someone had to get it all over the finish line, put his name and academic reputation at stake, and resolve to make it so. Looking back on it now, it was nothing short of miraculous that we did what we were able to do. Architecture of the Sacred was epic. It was like no other course at Hartwick or anywhere else. Apart from being a father, there's nothing in my life that I'm more proud to have done. Thank you, Sandy, for teaching us, for bringing us into your vision, and for leaving us with this incredible gift. I know it seems like the end. I have more. I'm so sorry. So listen, as a tribute to Sandy, in honor of his extraordinary talents as teacher, scholar, writer, musician, mystic, fellow worker, and friend, the Architecture of the Sacred and greater diaspora of Sandy Huntington alums, together with Sandy's family and friends, have organized the C.W. Huntington Jr. Memorial Library. By his own account, in addition to everything else he made time for in the course of his life, Sandy was a voracious reader, and through having known him, we each have books that came into our life because of Sandy. We have assembled a selection of such books that will now reside on a beautiful handmade bookcase in the Strawbale house. Special thanks also to the University of Hawaii Press and Wisdom Press, Sandy's academic publishers, each of whom donated editions of Sandy's published works. We offer this collection in memory of Sandy with the hope that it will draw people into this beautiful place and provide an occasion for them to sit, read, reflect, and be at peace. And now at last we come to the hard part, the part that I couldn't write, and so I realized it was never going to get easier to write it, that there was no special combination of words that were going to be the right words to say for this occasion. So what I'll say finally is this. For me personally, architecture of the sacred was more than a course. It was a needed safe haven, a place where I could start to come to terms with the grief, anger, and pain I was carrying around because of my own father's death in December of 1997. When I arrived at Hartwick, barely 10 months later, I believed I was putting on a brave face, soldiering through, doing what I thought an older brother was supposed to do when he was trying to be strong for his siblings and his mom. But really, I was playing pretend. I was hiding. I was wielding this tragedy as a shield to keep anyone from really seeing me. I can't now recall when or how Sandy would have learned that my father had died. Back then, I either tried to ignore what had happened, or else I reported it matter-of-factly, like it was sad, but not really a big deal, an obstacle I'd overcome. But it was a big deal, and I was suffering. Meeting Sandy when I did, getting pulled in by his gravity with his academic interests in Eastern philosophy and his general way of being grounded and wise, helped me. I started letting go of the anger and sadness and the deep sense of injustice I felt about my lot in life. I started to become aware of the ways that I was grasping and clinging. Getting to know Sandy, studying with him, gave me a glimpse into a different way of being. It is hard to imagine the course my life might have taken were it not for the good fortune of meeting him when I did. Architecture of the sacred provided me with a community, a family, peers that became friends, that then became like siblings. Sandy and Clark, our warm present dads, Charling, our fun uncle. The Strawbale house itself, a kind of home. And this is like my reflection, but every single student that participated in this experience could share their own story, and they could talk about the way that this experience changed their life. So when I talk about my love for Sandy, it is a manifold love, multidimensional, a love that grew and transformed as time passed, and Sandy continued to be a part of my life. Whether or not he ever realized it, I first came to love Sandy like a father, as someone who was there and available, someone that could offer guidance, support, comfort, company. As I got older, he became more like a father-brother hybrid, an old friend, someone with whom I could share little slices of life, an aimless walk on an afternoon in Ann Arbor, a meditation about the wood stove in my fireplace. Now, in this moment, as I think of Sandy and Liz, Katie and Sam, Clark, Charling, all of us that shared the experience of being here, working here, building here, for everyone that has come to Pine Lake today to mark this occasion and celebrate just one aspect of Sandy's life and legacy, the kind of love that is welling up is a sweeping, unfettered love. Love as existential gratitude, as a realization of and appreciation for the chance to even be here in the big cosmic sense, and also in the very specific sense of being present right now. All of us, narrow vessels of circumstance, bobbing together amidst life's vast sea. I am grateful to Sandy, as each of us who knew him are, for generating so much love, and through it, making all this possible. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Sarah Buckley, class of 2001, I think. I don't know. I just want to first of all thank Joe and Justin and everyone else who made today possible. I don't think I fully knew how much this would mean to me to be here. When Justin asked me to speak on the official docket here, about Sandy, I thought I really can't because I hadn't been in good touch with Sandy for 25 years, not in regular touch, you know. I seen him a couple times over the years, but then I thought about my life now and the impact that he had on my life as someone who I don't see very often, and I could measure it in like 15 different ways, the threads that came from these experiences here, from his impact on my life to my life now. Even listening to Justin, being in this beautiful place, I remember like 5 other ways that I can mark the impact he had on me and that these experiences did. It's pretty impressive. I took my first class with Sandy in the spring of 1998, and from then on, I took everything he taught. I majored in Sandy. Most of my close friends in college majored in Sandy. Now when I try to explain to people what my first degree is in, religious studies doesn't really explain it. I examined reality through religious texts, back and forth, with an accomplished scholar and spiritual mentor for 4 years. I can't quite explain the balm that sitting with these ideas was for me at that time. The ideas were both very exciting, but also extremely comforting. I was so unmoored in college. In a community of only 18 to 22-year-olds, I chose drinking as my #1 extracurricular activity to excel in. And there is a way in which that is funny, and it was funny. And then there was this other way in which there was a lot of suffering happening. But Sandy provided me an aesthetic and intellectual redemption. Sandy and the world of Buddhism provided me not just with profound validation that even as a silly small-town white kid, my suffering still made sense. It was connected with the depths, the exercises of wrestling with what the world was, what I was, seen from the very farthest away point I could possibly imagine and beyond, was grounding and thrilling. I still sit a little bit, not as much as I would like, but I have practices and I have aspirations to practice that I might not have if it weren't for Sandy. There were some core contradictions that I placed in tension with Sandy and what I learned from him that now seem so obviously false, but have been such a big part of my growing and my cosmology of my world ever since. One of them was the intellectual versus the practical. Now, Sandy never teased me about this completely false dichotomy or goaded me on to do something more academic. He obviously held the intellectual and practical up together, the titillating world of the mind and the sensual processes of hands to plaster. But I was really insecure about my practical skills, so I had to go on to be a nurse. I remember Sandy really appreciated the nurses in his class, and I just found out, like today, I think that he taught a class about hospice, like connected to hospice volunteering. Like, what is he not capable? Was he not capable of? I mean, and there's the obvious way impact he had that, like, my ex and I built a Strawbale house. Anyone is welcome to come visit. It's in Western New York. It's totally gorgeous. That was another thing I didn't think of when I wrote this, was like my ability to like imagine living somewhere beautiful. I don't think I really even appreciated that until I did the architecture of the sacred class. The other great tension in my life between that of addressing suffering on this plane and addressing suffering on the more profound level of ultimate truth. It's only really youth that could have confused me that the man who started a petition to save Arnold Hall and negotiated whatever insane bureaucracy that was necessary to pull these classes off was drawing a line where one's energies should go. I know now that my path is about alleviating suffering as a nurse and as an organizer and an activist, and I also know that the deeper I get into my own path, the more important it is to have a deeper well to draw on, a place where the wind doesn't blow, as Sandy used to say. And I've been thinking and trying to get there ever since. Most profoundly for me about Sandy's impact, though, was really just about his run-of-the-mill warmth and kindness as a mentor. He was my advisor. And he listened to my personal, I don't even know how to say this word, travails, with a sympathy and wistfulness. He shared what worked for him over the years. He allowed me to assist with him in some small practical ways for the Buddhism and the Catskill lecture series. I really aspired to be who I think he thought I was already. One of the most impactful experiences I had with Sandy was when I think he thought I was someone that should babysit, which I was not. But it's still, I got to have the pleasure of having dinner over at his house with his family. Katie and Sam were young enough that they still needed putting to bed. I want to thank Justin because I didn't know that we could overtly describe the corrective family experiences that Sandy provided for us. But now you know that we just can say that. But yeah, I'm in that householder stage now, and life can be so hectic. But I got to watch somehow with little children how Liz and Sandy still had this intellectual repartee with small children running around. I have no idea how they did that. But they brought me in like I was an adult too, like I belonged there in this conversation with them. Yeah. I think they had Liz and Sandy had some small disagreement, and it was just brushed over with warmth. I was like, "Did families can do this? This is amazing." And it was one of my favorite things to hear Sandy talk about was how much he loved Liz. From the vintage dresses when they first met to what a good mom she was, how she was truly a kind person. He oddly, I think I remember this right, thought it was like a weird coincidence that he happened to end up with this woman that was very kind, he didn't have that good judgment. I don't understand that still. And he really loved his kids. He didn't find the day-to-day with them tedious. Of all the things he taught me, the simple good vibes of that house that evening is one of the things I really want to emulate. And I didn't think about the community that he created for me and the other people that are in my life because of that. And the other thing about that evening in the house and this time here with you all that I think about are the two words of a curiosity and attention. Because what I noticed in the house was just the high quality of the attention that Liz and Sandy had for their kids, for me, and that I just feel I'm so excited and I'm so curious about the impact that Sandy had on all of you here. And yeah, that's it. So thank you.
Thank you, Karen. I feel bad. I'm going to read this off my phone. Sandy once referred to his phone as his digital leash. So I really felt like I should read it off paper, but I just didn't have time to get it together. I'm Dan Morse, class of 1997, former student, current student of Sandy's.
Keep the mic.
Oh yeah, put the mic where you're. Sorry, Dan Morse, class of 97. In January 1995, I was a Hartwick sophomore living on campus. One chilly morning, I walked down the steps to Anderson, where I had been told a small group of Tibetan monks was creating a sand mandala. I knew next to nothing about Buddhism at the time, much less Tibetan Buddhism, but I sat there with a handful of other students for 30 or 40 minutes and watched the monks at work. There were 3 of them. They labored with incredible patience and precision to create the exquisitely detailed mandala on the floor of the Foreman Gallery. The work took the form of an enormous circle, maybe 10 or 12 feet in diameter.
I remember the monks crouched down low over the mandala, holding special funnels that they would gently tap to dispense the countless grains of sand that made up the mandala's intricate interlocking colors and patterns. At times, it seemed to me that they worked one single grain of sand at a time. I was told that the mandala would take some weeks to finish. Once completed, it would be displayed for a time, then ritually destroyed in permanence. I first met Sandy later that same year in the fall of 1995. I was 20 years old, a junior then, and I had just moved out here to Pine Lake. Sandy was just starting his first semester of teaching at Hartwick, and I had signed up for his religion and literature class. I remember being very excited when I learned that we'd spend the semester reading literature that touched on religion, and that we'd then be journaling about what we read and discussing it together in class. I remember very early on thinking that this was a very different sort of class than I was used to, and that Sandy was a very different sort of professor. The following January, J-term 1996, Sandy taught a class called Buddhist Meditation here at Pine Lake. We met right down the hill in Lakeside Classroom. It was the first class he taught at Pine Lake. I was living in the lodge at the time, and I remember getting up early in the morning, making coffee, reading about Buddhism, and writing for the class. Then later walking down the snowy hill to Lakeside when Sandy showed up with a big blue van full of students from campus. We'd spend 2 or 3 hours in Lakeside every day learning to sit in meditation and talking about Buddhism. It was my first real experience with both. I remember when we first started studying the Four Noble Truths, we spent the better part of a morning discussing the first truth, dukkha, commonly translated as all life is suffering. I remember quite vividly all of us students arguing with Sandy very, very earnestly that this couldn't possibly be true, that all life could not possibly be suffering. We were all much, much younger then. It wasn't until much later that I came to understand that things like pain and loss and grief can be some of life's greatest teachers, if only we are willing to do the work of opening ourselves up to that. The next year, in January 1997, I had the incredible good fortune to go on a J-term trip to India with Sandy. It was the first of many such trips he took to India with Hartwick students. It was a life-changing experience to spend time in Delhi, in Bodh Gaya, in Varanasi, with Sandy G as our guide. After graduation, I went off into the world for a few years, but I eventually found my way back to Oneonta and ended up working at Pine Lake and later on campus from 2004 to 2013. I was pretty new in my job at Pine Lake when I had the chance to work on the Cobb House with the final architecture of the sacred class in the summer of 2004, I think it was. Sandy and Clark and Cha Ling, along with all the students in that class, were kind enough to let me, an outsider, work with them and sit with them and learn with them. That was an act of generosity I've never forgotten. Later on, I was part of a small group of people, most notably Peter Hussey and Jarrett Gibbs, who worked together to finish the Cobb House in 2010 and 2011. These are just a few of the stories that connect me to Sandy and to so many of you. My friendship with Sandy made my life immeasurably richer for the 25 years that I knew him, and will continue to do so, I'm sure, for the rest of my life. I know I'm not alone in that. I know many of you here today have your own stories of Sandy. Let's just take a moment to consider his time at Hartwick, all the years of teaching, all the classes he taught on campus, all the students he took to India, all the architecture of the sacred students who worked on the Strawbale house and the Cobb house, all the people whose lives were made richer through knowing him. We're here today to dedicate the Strawbale house to Sandy's memory. Let's also consider for a moment the vast mandala of experiences that Sandy created himself, his life's work, working slowly, patiently, one moment, one connection, one student, one person at a time. Let's take a moment to sit with that and really look at it. Sandy's part of the mandala may be finished now, but its colors, its patterns, its teachings continue, living on in the great mandala we are all building together, with every word, every thought, every action. It's up to each of us to carry them forward now. It's up to each of us to pass them on. Thank you.
Thank you, Jack, and thank you all the speakers. So in a moment, we're going to have a music performance, just a moment of listening to Wyatt Ambrose play while we, some of the things we heard sink in. There's a lot of names that were shared just now in the speakers, and I just want to make sure everyone in the crowd knows. If they don't mind, just to raise their hand. Adam Godet built the shelf. He's here on the Hartwick branch. Once you get a chance, and everyone can go in, there is a beautiful bookshelf that will house all the assigned material through the various courses. So visitors to the Strawbale house can read those things. A reserved library, if you will. By the way, the Cobb house is right behind us. For those of you who don't know where it is, I also want to point out Clark Sanders, who's here sitting on the grass, master builder. And though he didn't know I was going to do this, Michael Friedman is here, who's also a builder, who was very involved with the Strawbale house. So anytime you want to make your way over here, Wyatt. Jasmine. Oh, I'm sorry. And Jasmine, where are you, Jasmine? Oh, and Jasmine has made these wonderful terracotta cups. Which you can correct me if I'm wrong, but in India, often after drinking Thai out of the cup, you return it to the earth, right? But you don't have to do that. I mean, however you want to do it. So after the music, we will dedicate the plaque formally, and I'll have Lauren Bogiorno and Liz Huntington come and do that. And then we're going to open this up to remarks. As Justin and I are preparing the tea, we'll open this up to anyone who wants to speak on the mic or sitting on the stairs, however. All right? Thank you.
For those of you who don't know me, I'm Sandy's son-in-law, Wyatt. I'm also an adjunct professor of music at Hartwick. And one thing that Sandy and I connected over was the music of Thelonious Monk, which all this talk of spirituality, shouldn't be lost on us. The irony that one of his favorite musicians was just referred to as Monk. Anyway, music was such a big part of his life and connecting with his family and so many other people. This is one song that Sandy's family thought would be good. This is Ruby My Dear by Thelonious Monk.
Oh.
Here we go. Let me read transcription. This building is dedicated in memory of Hartwick Professor C.W. Sandy Huntington Jr., who led students and community members in its creation as an enduring expression of the beauty, power, and sacred nature of collaboratively designed and sustainably built spaces. Dedicated on September 20, 2025.
All right, there it is for the world to see forevermore. Fantastic. All right, well, so this has been going so really well so far, I think. I think Sandy would approve. He'd be having a ball. So we're a little behind in preparing the chai. Liz provided the chai tea recipe, and we're using milk and sugar and water. And it's going to be a little strong. It's going to be a few minutes. So I'm going to introduce. I'm going to encourage you to come on up if you feel the spirit, and just say whatever you want to say, your remembrances of Sandy, the Pine Lake, the Cobb House, the Strawbale House, and then we'll be serving tea pretty quick. So don't go away. It's gonna be worth it. I noticed President Jim Mullins, who was at a dedication, is here now, and at some point maybe he wants to say some remarks. No pressure. And I wanted to say some other speakers, Justin Dimmel specifically, talked about, how did this get here? Who paid for it? And stuff like that. And without disclosing who the foundations were, but this house and the Cobb House were largely funded by local foundations, some families who routinely and for a long time has supported Pine Lake. So there's a lot goes into what goes on out here, and Pine Lake's going through a bit of a renaissance, and it's a lot of deferred maintenance. It's not deferred anymore, and there's a lot of great things happening. So I'm going to encourage you to. There's several ways to do this. There's a QR code on that stake. There's a QR code by the cups. Click on that, and you can. With your phone, you can you can give us your email address, and we'll send you the Pine Lake newsletter. And so you can stay in touch, because Pine Lake, I think, is got a bright future, and would like to see more things like this occur and continue to occur. So please do. All right. Someone's going to start us off, I know, because we spoke earlier. So come on up. Oh, you're going to start us off. Great to see you.
And I think if you don't really want to use the mic, you're going to sound like this, which is fine. So you're not forced to use the mic, but please, I guess it would be easier for everyone to hear if you want to use the mic.
Hi, I'm Ken Nunzik. I grew up here before Hartwick owned it, and in fact, the first 3 years of my life, I lived right here. The cabin that was here before this. Sandy and Liz have been such dear friends since they moved here, and I can't say anything more than these wonderful folks I've already said about Sandy. But I just, they're such a blessing, and such a blessing to Pine Lake, which has always been my special place. And I never tire of it. 80 years later, in a couple months, I still come here as often as I can. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Lyle Dalton. I'm a professor of religious studies at Hartwick College, and I was hired by Sandy and Gary Harrion back in the spring of 1999. And subsequent to that, Sandy and I started a 20-year conversation about every topic in the world that you can imagine. We both loved sort of the eclectic and the curious, and so we enjoyed just sort of talking a little about everything. But I thought, and I could say many things, I could say many, many things, but I thought, let's hear from Sandy. Let's hear from Sandy. So one of the heroic things about his life, I think the speakers were very eloquent in talking about his teaching, but in the last months of his life, when he knew his mortality was close, he wrote a book, and it's a wonderful book. It's called What I Don't Know About Death. Okay, sorry. What I Don't Know About Death. Sorry about that. And so I thought it would be good to hear from Sandy, just a passage from this book, just to kind of give you a sense of Sandy the scholar, but also Sandy just the wonderfully eloquent writer. He was just a spectacularly wonderful writer amongst all his many virtues. Okay. So this is in the latter section of the book. Okay, I'm going to start near the end. Over the span of a long life, the weight of these judgments and fears becomes a dreadful burden. My adult persona, forever alone and enthralled to its self-centered needs and desires, forever rebounding between what is acceptable and what is not, will never allow me to live out these final days in peace, much less face death with equanimity. For that, I need a renewed innocence and simplicity, one that is capable of accepting the love and forgiveness and simple kindness of my family and friends, and capable as well of offering love and forgiveness and kindness in return. In order to live what is left of my life and die in peace, the wrathful deity of death is teaching me to give myself over to the human community and to a felt kinship with the non-human world. A world to which I've always belonged while never fully appreciating the significance of that belonging. A world where this failing body of mine is, like all bodies, a tiny, fleeting shadow in the immensity of creation. In only a few months, the gestalt has shifted, and after a lifetime of study and practice of Buddhism, I am only now learning here in this prison of necessity to release my grip on life, and so to love life as it is, in all its beauty and horror, and give myself over to the embrace of those infinite others, human and non-human, the earth in which we are rooted, teeming with beetles and grubs and worms, the grass and flowers and trees, the robin building a nest outside my window, the hawk circling high overhead, the clouds, wind, rain, and sun, all of which have nourished and sustained me throughout this long journey home. They are in me, and I am in them. We are inseparable. Okay, and so with that, I want to thank Sandy for all the gifts, and this book will be in the library, of course. I also want to say one other quick thing. I'd say my career in higher education is directly attributable to Sandy, and I would say the one amazing gift that he gave us, and I also got this from Gary, because I think, was freedom. Sandy deeply believed in academic freedom, and that meant being able to kind of create the kinds of courses, the kinds of educational opportunities like we see behind us, and in some ways that was one of the greatest gifts of my life, is the ability to be free in the way that I approached my academic work. And so that I will also thank Sandy profusely for.
Hello, my name is Tracy Verma. Some of you may know my husband, Roop Verma, who was a sitarist who also taught music and yoga and meditation at Hartwick, and I taught yoga there as well. It was my greatest honor to co-teach the class that he taught here during J-term. Are any of you from that class who are here today? It was a really special time. I wanted to honor his Sanskrit fluency with a mantra called the Mahamrityunjaya mantra, which I think is a very powerful mantra to release suffering, to release all clinging to this human form, and to be able to drop like a ripe fruit from the vine and let go, which is what that passage was about. So let's do a mantra together, and if any of you know it, please chant along. If not, think about that feeling of release and letting go of whatever is holding you back from feeling the deep connection to the earth, to the spirit, to all that is, and to helping Sandy's family and dear ones to release and be at peace from this loss that we're all suffering from. Om Triambakam Yajamahe Sugandhim Pushtivardhanam Urvarukamiva Bandhanan Mrityor Mukshiyamamritat. Om Triambakam Yajamahe Sugandhim Pushtivardhanam Urvarukamiva Bandhanan Mrityor Mukshiyamamritat. Swaha. Om Triambakam Yajamahe Sugandhim Pushtivardhanam Urvarukamiva Bandanan Mrityor Mukshiyamamritat Swaha. Om Shanti, Om Shanti, Om Shanti, Om. Om Shanti, Om Shanti, Om Shanti, Om.
Hello, everybody. My name is Mia Singh. I am the son of Joanna Levy Singh, who was also a student of Sandy's. I feel bad, but I can't remember what year she graduated, but that was about 20 years ago, something like that, 25.
Double O.
Oh, thank you. Perfect. Thank you, Joe. I am also currently a student at Hartwick. This is my sophomore year, and after my mom graduated from Hartwick, she's actually from the area, she grew up in Franklin. She chose to continue living in Oneonta for most of her life, and I was raised here. And I guess everybody else has said so much stuff, and there's really not much I can say, but I suppose I just wanted to come up here because the entire time everyone was talking, I just felt a very deep sense of lineage and interconnection, and it's something that I often feel right now being a student at Hartwick, but also just living in Oneonta. The house I grew up in is down the road from Liz and Sandy, and something that I find deeply special about this community, and I think anybody here can attest to this, is the way in which everything constantly remains, in the sense that even when somebody is no longer physically here, the impact that they have, the way in which they exude their energy, the connections they make, every small interaction they have continues to live on. And I feel that just walking around the physical geography of this space, and I feel it in every interaction I have with this community. And there's nothing else like that in the world. To have, especially thinking about the current era that we are in, it is a time of great suffering and change. There's always been suffering, but we all know that this is a time right now where there is mass violence and genocide and just cultural disruption. And the fact that we have such a sacred place, such as Pine Lake and Hartwick and the greater Oneonta community, and this community of people who continues to remember and preserve legacy and memorialize that, that is what community, I really can't say anything besides the fact that that's what it's all about. I wouldn't even be here if my mom hadn't met Sandy, because when she met Sandy, she also her father had just died. She was 18 when he died, and she was also an older sibling, and she deeply, deeply was impacted by the way in which he lived his life, the way in which he taught, yes, but also just the human being that he was. And she actually met my dad when she went on a study abroad trip with Sandy to India in Varanasi. And just thinking about that, it is not lost on me, the way that every interaction has ripple effects beyond what we could conceivably imagine. And growing up, there were so many stories or anecdotes she would have about things that she learned from Sandy and Liz. And my life is all the richer because of that, and I'm grateful to know the people who still work at Hartwick and the community members, the alumni, and everybody else who knows him and continues to preserve his legacy, because we all are going to die. We all come from people who are dead now, and I think one of the richest things that humans have done throughout, as long as humans have been here, is tell stories, because stories are our lifeblood, and the more that we tell stories, the more that we are honoring each other, the past, and the people to come. So thank you so much, and thank you, Joe, thank you everybody else, and yeah.
Yes, please.
Hello. Forgive my tired voice. Drove up from Philly last night. I'm so glad Dan Morse let me know about this weekend because I hopped in that car real quick to be here. Alyssa Pearson. I'm 2012. Lived out here for 4 years at Pine Lake. Was very fortunate to experience a sacred space for that long, and with many of you and others who aren't here today. Someone mentioned Sandy taught us what freedom was, and I wanted to share two things. I have 2 post-it notes I didn't get to bring with me, but 2 post-it notes from Sandy that live on my fridge. And one says, Kerala, India. I had applied for the Duffy Scholarship. It got rejected because I broke the rules. And I go to his office crying, and he writes on his post-it, Kerala, India. And you know, he just had this like quiet, steady drama in him that you're just like, there's a mystery in his eyes. And I didn't ask any questions. I just said, okay. And I went back and I reapplied, knowing nothing about India. Boy, I did not know what I signed up for on that one. And he just knew, like he knew me, and he knew what I needed, and he knew what experience, like, and journey I should embark on. And I trusted him implicitly and said nothing. And I took that post-it, I left, I went and updated that application, and then I went to India. I ended up dropping out for a semester because it was such an intense and amazing experience. I stayed for as long as I could until I used every dime of that Duffy scholarship. So thank you, Duffy family. But I just remember the quiet stillness and mystery in him that I didn't need to ask any questions. Like he knew, and he told me where to go, and I did it, and it really changed the trajectory of my life. And the second one says B, letter B overall, because I very often refused to do a lot of his assignments. And instead I did my own philosophical papers on dreams and things on my mind and other things, and instead of penalizing me, you know, he would always send responses and remarks and comments and leaned into the things that I was curious about. And I think he gave me the freedom to think and be who I needed to be. And I'll never forget just getting to spend hours at his office and Dan's, getting to just talk about what was present for us and important in the world or our minds and hearts at the time, and the lessons I got to take away from that, and the respect that he gave. You know, he really did treat one of the gals, she said, treated us like a peer and like an adult, and we're absolutely not. And I just think that respect and that love just went a long way, and I think we all got to have that. So I just want to thank him and the spirit that he gave that, and it's just so incredible to see all of you. And as Dan said, each of us have had those stories in life, but those 2 post-its, a man of few words at times, but so much deep meaning in who he was and what he gave us. So thank you, Sandy.
Well, this is largely a Hartwick gathering. I do teach at Hartwick, but I'm going to give the perspective of a neighbor, a very close neighbor. Some of you may know that my husband, Jim Berkovitz, and my daughter, Iris and Sarah, have shared a driveway with the Huntingtons for 30 years, 28, something like that. And that has been one of the great privileges of our life, I may tell you. I mean, we're just so happy. But it also has given us, particularly, I guess, me, the opportunity to eavesdrop on the neighbor. Now, Liz largely stays inside, but Sandy was always in our shared driveway. And a typical morning would be, okay, Sandy's out there. I have to get in my car. I don't want to, interrupt Sandy's thought process, but hi. Duca. Uh-huh. And, it became actually one of my pleasures in life to try to convince Sandy that maybe it really wasn't all suffering like those possibly naive students, but like I became, Polly Sunshine or something. Anyway, but what I wanted to say in that eavesdropping, very important, Sandy was one of the most remarkable fathers. And it's going to be really hard not to cry. But I really saw this out the window, literally. Sandy, always having Sam, Katie, by his side, teaching them incredible carpentry skills in the garage. I'm so jealous. Building a absolutely beautiful treehouse that was, well, Sarah and Katie could tell lots of tales from that tree house, I'm sure, that we were never privileged to know. But it was a place that I actually was so beautiful, I wanted to spend the night there myself. Could this be a tree house for the grown-ups too? No, it was their tree house. And cooking for them. He was a remarkable cook. And taking such care with the way that we're fed. And not just fed with everyday food, but as someone said, the curiosity, the honoring of their imaginations, their creativity, their intelligence. Of course, Liz is very much part of this as well, but no, I wanted just to give that perspective as well as the academic perspective that, and I remember him once telling me that he was so happy that he had been able to have children, his children. He said it was the thing that made him happiest in his life.
It's been a privilege for me to listen and to learn even more. When I came a couple of years ago as the president here at Hartwick, as the interim president, one of the first things I did was sort of ask, tell me about some of the giants who've taught here. And one name always came up, Sandy. And what I learned through that is that he represented, and it came out today, what liberal learning should be about, and what life on a small campus can and should be about. It should be about being a great colleague and mentor in the faculty. It should be about exploring and seeking truth. It should be about appreciating beauty. And it should be about transforming young people's lives. And everything I heard today reinforces what I have heard across 2 years about him. So what I will say, although I never had the honor of knowing him, I feel like I do. And I'm grateful. I'm grateful because I came out of retirement to do this. And his story reminds me why being part of a great liberal arts community is so special and so important right now. So thank you for allowing me to be part of this ceremony and allowing me to listen. This is a sacred space for all of us. It will remain so. And all the work we do here at Pine Lake is going to be in memory of Sandy and so many others who love this space. So I appreciate the privilege of being with you. It's an honor, and thank you very
much. How's the tea coming up there, Justin?
Good, we're ready. Let's start pouring tea.
Really close? Okay.
Yeah, we're ready. We can start pouring tea.
We'll bring out some teapots in a second. Teapots are by the sink. Yeah, well, while we wait for the last couple minutes for the tea, I'll say a couple words. So, I met Sandy again because our kids met in preschool, and then we started hanging out. Actually, the very first night, they had us over for dinner, and we had such a good time and drank so much red wine. We just slept over. And I remember we scored huge points with Sandy and Liz. They're like, the next morning we're having coffee, and they're like, you guys slept over. You know how cool that? Nobody does that. So we're like, well, it's, the couch was there, and, it's just easier, and the kids were already sleeping, so. Anyway, so then it continued from there. We spent a lot of time. We went on summer vacations to my parents' place, St. Lawrence River. Had ball for years, like 10 years. You know, a week up there, all kinds of shenanigans. And so Sandy was really like, to me, was the person we were raising our kids with. And I slowly started to catch on that he was a lot more than just that. And he'd lend me a book once in a while, and same thing. I'd be like, "What's with all the suffering, Sandy?" You know, and just cheer up. And we used to love to rib each other, and he was really good at it. And I'm like, I would castigate him if he was leaning over too much. You know, like just like hoo boy, right? And I'd be like, Sandy, you're not even standing up straight, for God's sake. He'd give it right back to me. So I knew him very differently, and as I slowly became more aware that he's accomplished so much. You've heard today, 8 years in India, riding his motorcycle through Afghanistan and Iran. Back then, you could do that. To return to, I'm not sure where, somewhere in Germany, but he rode a motorcycle from India to Europe. Yeah, I don't think he had a helmet on either. Ponytail flying and stuff, like, yeah. So, and then one of the other things, but see, he did all these things, but I never felt like out intimidated or outshadowed or something. He just wasn't that guy. I guess humble doesn't quite, he just didn't think, he didn't want to fall into that. It's all an attachment. It was all kind of bull crap, So that was refreshing, so, he always was very fond of saying, he'd look at me, his eyes real wide. He'd be like, Joe, I never even wanted a job. I wanted to stay unemployed. What am I doing with this job and kids and a wife and a house? And he's like shaking his head. I don't know. He loved dwelling on that. And I'd be like, it's okay, Sandy. It's okay to have a job. And then he'd say, if I was complaining about some kind of, I had just gotten into a fight with my wife or one of my kids or something, or one of my brothers, but if you had met my brothers, you knew. Anyway, and I'd be bummed out or something, and he'd look at me and maybe put his hand on my shoulder and say, well, Joe, every day is another day to try to get it right. Or that's the first thing in the morning over coffee up the St. Lawrence River. I'd come in and sit down, and he'd say, another day to try to get it right. We just always trying. Those are little witticisms, and that's really useful, because each day is another day to try to get it right. Okay, I see some tea movement. All right, I'm going to let it go there. I could go on forever. But thank you again for being here, and for those of you who want to stick around, it's a beautiful day at the lake. Take the trails, check out the Cow House if you haven't seen that in a long time. It's absolutely Hobbit-like and mystical kind of thing. I mean, this is beautiful, but that is a whole different thing. Okay, Kelly.
Hi, my name is Kelly Glover Rosengrad. I was also one of Sandy's students, one of the architecture professor. Sorry. So another student, and my husband and I have organized architecture of the style lunch. There's kind of enough to go around, but anyone's welcome to stay, and there's vegan and gluten-free options. So if you want, you can come on into Strawbale and enjoy some yummy food, architecture style.
Yeah, start pouring.